So, you're looking for something scary? Something to truly entertain the notion of fear? Sorry, I'm afraid I don't know many stories that could please your desire. However, there was one story that I can't seem to shake from my mind. Well, it's not so much scary as it is odd. A few years back, we used to have this neighbor who lived a few houses up the street. Well, this man wasn't very odd at first. I've noticed him a few times. I even managed to have a chat with him. He was in his late 30s at the time, though his appearance was quite drawn out, meaning he looked very tired, more similar to a man twice his age. I inquired about his fatigue and he merely waved it off as lack of sleep. After that day, on my way home from work, I noticed something slightly off-putting about the man's house. When I passed by, his front door was completely wide open. No lights, no movement in or out. Just an open front door leading into the dark of the house. It wasn't really unnerving at the time. I just thought that being forgetful like that could get you killed. But I shrugged it off. His house, his life, and continued home. The night felt a bit chillier than usual, though I wasn't prepared for what happened next. My doorbell rang. Wondering who could possibly be needing me at 11 p.m. at night, I stumbled to the door. I have a neat little eyepiece in my door, so I can choose who I talk to. Creeping up to the door and peering through the lens, I didn't see anything. Not like some kids ran up, rang, and took off. It was completely black on the other side of the eyepiece. Quickly, I flipped on the porch light, and catching a glimpse of light through the window, I stumbled away from the door. Something had to be in front of that eyepiece for me not to have seen the light. Retrieving my trusty baseball bat from the coat closet near the door, I grasped the handle. Forcefully pulling open the door, bat at the ready, I was relieved to find nothing there. Well, I shouldn't say that. There was a note taped in front of the eyepiece. It simply said, "Hide." I immediately shut the door and locked it. I paused for a moment, after listening to the empty silence. Why would someone tell me to hide? Through a note on my door? I thought about as I continued to listen to the random noises my house makes. The heater turning on and calmly breathing. The settling foundation in the wall, causing a slight pop. The sound of scratching from inside the walls. I stopped, frozen in shock. That was a new noise. It sounded as if someone was raking their fingers on the inside of the wall. Then the doorbell rang once more. That jarring noise stirred me from my shock, and I opened the door furiously. I once again felt that unwelcomed restraint that gripped me as I stood. There was nothing on my door, or anyone on my porch. Just out of reach of the porch light stood a man. He was simply standing there gawking at me. I asked if he was all right, but he just stared with his mouth wide open. It was a very cold stare, mixed with an expression of shock. I once again shut the door and locked it. My heart was rapidly throbbing inside my chest, but when I tried to calm down, I noticed that the scratching noise had stopped. I turned off the light and made my way back up to sleep. The next morning, I decided that I would talk to my neighbor and ask if he had similar occurrences. I knocked on his door and waited for an absurdly long time. Finally, the door opened slowly, and he asked me what I wanted. After telling him about my doorbell and the random note, he told me to quit wasting his time and sternly shut the door in my face. So, returning home that night, I noticed something was off about the arrangement of my living room. There was a chair off to the side that looked as if someone had been sitting there. Upon the chair was a small piece of paper. What the paper said sent me running out of my own house onto the front lawn. The paper said run. So I did. I would be lying if I said I didn't feel foolish for escaping my own house, but I'm not the type to take chances. After a moment of catching my breath, I managed to make my way back into the house, and I sat down on my couch. Turning on the TV, I was able to zone out and forget about these little messages. I must have nodded off because when I opened my eyes, it was already night out. Opening my eyes, I heard the doorbell ring again. I thought to myself this was getting old as I turned off the TV. Though when I did, I caught a glimpse of a reflection in the dark television that sat before me. Behind me, the door was wide open and a man was standing in my house, facing towards the TV. I quickly turned around and the door was still closed. Another ring. I made my way to the door and checked the eyepiece once more. Now, I wish I could say that nothing was there, or that a note was found. But what I saw on the other side of my door was my neighbor. He stood there with a gnarled expression of pain and eeriness, his gaze fixed upon the eyepiece. I went to open the door, but something held me back. Something pulled my hand back from the handle. I watched the darkness drape over his entire body, and he was gone. I called the cops, informing them that the neighbor was harassing me. I was told they would send a car soon. Well, as I waited, I turned on all the lights in my house and turned on the TV once again, trying to pass the time. I awoke an hour later, after once again nodding off to the sound of a doorbell being pushed again and again. I stood at the door and looked to make sure. When I did, something dark and shadowy hit the door, causing me to jump back. Checking the eyepiece again, I saw 2 police officers standing outside my door. Rubbing my eyes and opening the door, they told me some very unsettling news. That my neighbor's house was completely empty, and no sign of the neighbor himself. I told the cop about my strange happenings. They told me to lock my doors and windows and said to call them if anything changes. Not 20 minutes after the police left, I was heading to bed when I heard that dreadful sound. Opening the door, thinking the police forgot something, I was face to face with my neighbor. He looked very ill and unkempt. I warned him to leave before I made him leave. He shakily pulled out a slip of paper from his pocket and dropped it on the ground and walked away. Picking it up, I slammed the door and glanced at the paper. It only had one word inscribed on it. Scream. Almost instantly, I heard a loud bash against my door. Gulping down my fear that lumped in my throat, I refused to move. That's when I heard the doorbell. Still, I didn't move. It rang and rang. For almost a half an hour, it rang. And still I stood staring directly at the door, a few steps away.
Chris, this is a fantastic story. Though, what I'm trying to figure out is what compelled you to murder your sister. We know you were leaving random notes around the house, and that the doorbell was the police returning to check on you after you made a strange phone call about your neighbor. Chris, he never existed. You know that, right? Well, I suppose we'll just have to try again tomorrow. Up the medication. He has a colorful imagination.